14.5 minutes after the hour right now, the debate over climate change and the so-called Climategate emails coming to a head on Capitol Hill. President Obama is going to be heading to the climate change summit in Copenhagen, Denmark, next Friday, and he won't be alone. One of the Senate's biggest critics of global warming is also planning on being there, and he's with us now. I'm joined by the ranking Republican on the Environment and Public Works Committee, Senator James Inhofe. Senator, great to have you with us this morning.
Nice to be with you, Karen.
So back in 2003, you called global warming, quote, the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. What is your current position today on global warming and climate change?
Well, Karen, it's actually stronger than it was then. I said that the idea that man-made gases are causing it, and they were saying entirely, I said that's the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on American people. Now it looks like all of the science that was behind this, the IPCC, and our viewers need to know that's the United Nations. Their lead guy, in fact, is Phil Jones, and you can't even find him to interview. He is now out of the picture, and investigations going on, and every day something new comes out that is really totally debunked the science behind this whole thing that they're in Copenhagen for.
Well, we talked to several of the scientists involved and scientists who've sort of studied this entire thing. What they're contending is that if you take 13 years worth of people's emails back and forth with each other, that you could find a smoking gun at some point. But they say on balance, there's really no denying that the planet is getting warmer. In fact, they said that 2009 could be one of the 5 warmest years we've seen since they started keeping records. What do you say to the fact that they say some of these emails are just cherry-picked because of opposition to the whole theory of climate change?
Hey, Karen, if it were just me saying it, it'd be one thing, but all over the world, they're talking about this, and just this morning, the meteorologist, one of the groups, has said that they're changing their position. Listen to the UK Telegraph. This is the worst scientific scandal of our generation. The Guardian, this is an activist paper saying pretending this is not a real crisis isn't going to make it go away. I think the whole world is looking at this, and they're desperately trying to find scientists that are going to say, oh no, we haven't been depending upon this, and maybe Phil Jones didn't say those exact things. That's why we need an investigation, and I think that you folks would agree with that.
All right, well, let's put aside Climategate for a minute. I want to talk a little bit more about your presence there. You've called yourself a one-man truth squad. You're attending this conference in Copenhagen. What is the message that you want to deliver?
Well, I'll be going with several senators and a couple of House members. The main reason I want to go is I had envisioned that Barbara Boxer and maybe John Kerry and some others would go and make them think that we're going to pass cap-and-trade legislation. I want to make sure that they know it's dead. It is not going to pass the United States Senate. It's not even close. And so I think we owe it to the 192 countries that are there to let them know what we are and are not going to do in the United States. Now, the recent thing, of course, is the endangerment finding. And this is something that, to me, this is, well, in fact, this is an admission that they don't have the votes to pass it through the legislature, so they're going to try to do it through the White House. I don't believe that's going to work.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the cap-and-trade legislation. You've argued before that you think this is going to basically lead to a torrent of new regulations, that it would destroy thousands of jobs, it would make energy, gas more expensive for consumers and hit small businesses. How much of this is about the costs and how much is about the science?
Well, first of all, you got two things. You have the science and you have the economics. And we've been talking about both for a long time when these bills. Just keep in mind, we've had 4 bills debated in the United States Senate. We do know this. There's no question about it. We have analyses from MIT, from the Wharton School of Economics. It would cost about $330 billion a year, a cap and trade, what was being considered in the Senate. Now, this equates to about $2,000 an American family. Every taxpayer, so that's a huge tax increase. And according to Lisa Jackson, who is the head of the EPA, if we did this unilaterally and passed that, it would not reduce the emissions worldwide any at all. It just caused our jobs to go over to countries like China and India and Mexico where they don't have any restrictions.
You're saying if they're not on board with some changes, which they have said they would be on board with some changes, reducing their own carbon emissions as well as other things. But I just want, or carbon efficiency, I just want to ask you one quick question. President's reduction, he talked about the cuts that he would possibly be willing to make, maybe a 17% reduction in emissions from 2005 levels. Now, some that we have we've talked to some of the environmentalists say that's actually quite low. That's a baby step, if you will, because they want them to cut 25 to 40% in order to head off some of the worst effects of climate change. So do you think that even some incremental changes to eventually reduce the carbon emissions in the U.S. would have that big of an impact financially on companies?
Oh, yes, I do. In fact, that 17% was in the Markey-Waxman bill. That's the figure. That's what they had analyzed and said how much it would cost. Karen, it doesn't mean that we can't do some things. The Western or the Eastern Pacific Partnership Program that would allow us to share technology with developing countries, that might be something worthwhile, and that would actually have some results, but not mandating these things that are coming in the cap and trade bill. You would ask the question, a lot of people do, if you really want to cut carbon, why don't you put a carbon tax on? And the reason they don't do that is then people would know how much it's going to cost them. Cap and trade is very tricky. They pick winners and losers and try to convince everyone that they're going to be a winner. It's not going to pass.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. It was great talking to you, and please check in again from Copenhagen. Let us know how it goes for you there. Senator James Inhofe, great to talk to you today.
I'd like that.